Yoon Suk-yeol, president of South Korea, went to Washington on the invitation of the Biden administration, only the second such invitation from the Biden administration. As you can see, Biden doesn't do much diplomacy or any, because I don't count this as diplomacy. So the president of South Korea went for a 5-day visit, and it was, of course, much hyped, and a lot of damaging things came out of this. A lot of cringe moments came out of this. But I want to give you a background of why this was happening in the first place. And so this visit from the 24th to 29th of April, this visit was happening. I wrote in CGTN. I am an opinions contributor there. Yoon's visit to U.S. is about hegemony and damage control, not diplomacy. So I talk about this visit as damage control, not diplomacy. Hegemony and not diplomacy. Because the invitation was not about building better bilateral relations on an equal basis. It was about telling South Korea to get your behind to DC. We have the DPRK, North Korea, and China to get to. We need you to be a good puppet state with your thousands of U.S. troops stationed, dozens of bases stationed. We need you to be what you're supposed to be, our puppet. And so it's time to amp up the economic and military aggression. That was the point. So they called it trust and deterrence, but trust and deterrence simply means those things that I just stated. So Yoon visited, and so a day before his trip, you had the Financial Times reporting that the U.S. was urging South Korea not to fill any market gap in China if Beijing bans a Washington's memory chip maker from selling chips. That is obviously an act that impairs South Korea's economic sovereignty, intervenes in the internal affairs of South Korea, and violates trade rules and demonstrates the U.S.'s hegemony. So get what that means. That means that before the trip, the U.S. was already making demands. It already said, we're going to increase we've already had this export ban on China's, on semiconductor technology to China. China is ready to retaliate by banning some of our equipment, right? Making it harder for that equipment to reach the Chinese market. You're not to fill that gap for China. Do what we say, okay? Do what we say. Yoon's trip, and that's incredibly damaging because I'm going to get to why in a second. It's hurt South Korea's economy already, this export ban. Yoon's trip is coming amid an unstable period for U.S.-South Korea relations as shown by the following two facts. On the one hand, Yoon's conservative government has placed a priority on developing warm relations with the U.S. It's bolstered military ties in its ongoing row with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. From the 13th of March to the March 23rd, the U.S. and South Korea held their largest joint military drills in 5 years. Yoon has placed the issue high on the agenda, that of DPRK, for this summit, and was going to bring a delegation of 100 business delegates in a signal that South Korea is willing to strengthen its economic cooperation with the United States. You think, a lot of people in the U.S. and the West might think, oh, well, that's reasonable. The DPRK is a big threat, right? It's a big threat, as well as, oh, well, South Korea should do business with the United States. Well, it's more complicated than that because that's only the one side of it, right? First of all, if you want to look at the history of the Korean War, it was the U.S. as the aggressor propping up the South to be the genocidaire puppet of the United States. That's what actually happened through the DMZ that was drawn, right? In the Soviet Union, the U.S. going through some kind of Cold War. But really, it was the U.S. that invaded and destroyed and killed many people, destroyed the entirety of North Korea's infrastructure. That's what really happened. And so you have these escalations with military exercises, and this economic cooperation is not really cooperation at all. And we can see that from the fact that the bilateral relationship is not equal. South Korea is a subordinate. Yoon has taken controversial stances on the leaked Pentagon documents that revealed the U.S. has spied on South Korean officials as they mull over the prospects of sending weapons to Ukraine. That just happened. Those leaks came out not too long ago. That's only been a matter of weeks, right? That came out this month of April 2023. These leaked Pentagon documents. What did they say? They said that the U.S. had knowledge of South Korea's conversations about sending Ukraine weaponry. And remember, I covered on this channel the New York Times report on this issue, where they knew and understood that the U.S. was going to ask South Korea to give up some of its stockpiles for the war effort in Ukraine and go and bypass bypass sending it to Ukraine directly by giving it to a third country. So the Yoon government has maintained that much of the documents were fabricated and that the U.S. had no malicious intent in its intelligence gathering. This position has been characterized as humiliating diplomacy by opposition parties in South Korea and has exacerbated unrest over other issues, such as the lack of accountability on Japanese firms that participated in forced labor within the country during World War II, as well as the growing public discontent with the nation's ailing economy. So, just FYI, it's been a huge point of controversy for many years now, right? Since the end of the of World War II, Japan colonized Korea, and what did Japan do? Well, it basically enslaved people. It enslaved people to work for Japanese companies to help with Japan's industrialization. That's a very common theme with colonization, and it happened. And after the fall of Japan's empire, after the end of World War II, there has been years and years of conversation about what it would mean for there to be some kind of settlement, some kind of process of justice to get people the money, the ancestors of these enslaved people, to get them some kind of monetary compensation and otherwise. What has Yoon done in this conversation? He's actually bypassed Japan's government and said, no, we'll only deal with the companies. And the companies, of course, are not going to give a lot, right? And they're not going to have much incentive to give a lot. And that's angered a lot of people in South Korea who say, you're not serious about this. But it only got worse during the meeting. Because during the meeting, the U.S., South Korea at the same time reestablished preferred trading status with Japan, further pouring oil onto the fire, gasoline onto the fire. So people in South Korea are furious because now preferred trading status has been reestablished with Japan. And all Yoon can say is, well, our economic interests with Japan are way more, in our partnership and friendship with Japan are way more important than those concerns of you little people who are probably still poor because you had to start off with facing Japanese colonialism decades ago, and we're not going to help you get justice from Japan. That's what is happening. And then you have the economic situation, right? This is the context you need to understand what's going on. The economic situation is very, very bad in South Korea. So there's a huge trade deficit, which has been caused by the U.S.'s export bans on semiconductor technology to China. China comprised of nearly 40% of South Korea's chip exports prior to the ban's enforcement last year. But since the export ban, South Korea has seen its exports halve as of January of last year, and it's only gotten worse. This has exacerbated macroeconomic pressure from inflation, and some experts predict South Korea is headed toward an economic crisis because the U.S., of course, is weaponizing the dollar and placing downward pressure on all currencies, the euro, but also the South Korean won. So Yoon's visit is yet another exercise in the U.S.'s ongoing effort to contain China and expand its hegemony in the region at the expense of so-called allies. The U.S. wants to strengthen its military relationship with nations like South Korea and Japan while seeking assurances from these governments that they will loyally follow the United States in destructive escalations toward China. Yoon's visit is also an exercise in damage control meant to show that there are benefits to being a partner of the United States, that being a vassal of the United States can actually bring you benefits. But one of the biggest mistakes that Yoon made on this trip in preparation for it was commenting on the Taiwan issue. And so the Taiwan issue, of course, is China's red line. And South Korea's President Yoon said, well, Taiwan's a global issue, and it's just comparable to the DPRK and South Korea's conflict. This angered China. There was a recall of the ambassadors, right? The Chinese ambassadors in Korea, and there has been a souring of relations ever since, and there's no reconsideration of this remark. So that's a huge thing. So this was all a lead up. South Korea was fluffing the pillow, so to speak, for the United States, saying, yeah, we're going to bring to you a host of things that will make you happy so you can make us happy. Well, it only got more cringe, right? And it only gets more, and it's ridiculous because South Korea needs Chinese investment. Chinese investment is huge for South Korea, 44.5% right there. With in 2022 alone, investment increased by 44% between the two countries. But now that's all been put under danger. And this visit only made things worse, right? It's all about this effort to try to isolate and contain China, while of course throwing in the DPRK for good measure, because the US is still at war with Korea and it wants to use South Korea as a pawn to continue it. So all of that was on the table during this visit. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of what came out of it, because it was bad, right? What came out of it is dangerous. What came out of it is incredibly damaging. But before we get to that, we have to look at the cringe, just absolute undignified way that President Yoon went about his visit. And I got to show you, this is Yoon Suk-yeol. This is Al Jazeera reporting on this absolutely humiliating scene of him singing American Pie to Joe Biden. There's nothing more, I think, heinous than this display of this minstrel show that Yoon Suk-yeol put on for Biden, all in the name of warmongering and at the expense of South Korea's own interests. So let's listen to this, because you need to see this to understand the dynamics here. This is not a bilateral relationship. This is a relationship of colonizer and colonized, neo-colonizer and neo-colony. This is vassal to master. Here we go.
A long, long time ago. You still remember how the music used to make me smile. And I really felt my chains, that I could make those people there.
Look at Biden's face. Is he there? Is Biden home? I mean, can someone help this guy? Look at that stare. This is a joke, right? This is absolutely a joke. Here we go. Let's continue.
Maybe happy for a while. February made me shiver with a paper I deliver. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't have one more step. I can't remember if I tried well, the Bowie's willow bright. Something touched me deep inside the day the music died.
Whoa, that's so cool. Wow, the Asian guy, right? He can sing like an American. Oh, wow. All the while, what was he doing there? He was selling out South Korea on behalf of the United States' absolutely counterproductive war on China that they are escalating, and as well as this war, of course, on Korea. Korea's at war, and South Korea is a party to it. So all of that is to say is that Yoon was being used as a puppet, and he was willfully ready to be that puppet. So I want to show you, this is what the Global Times had to say about it, okay? And they'll go over, the Global Times does a good job briefly. And I was going to do the readout of the White House, but it's way too long because they're trying to be so overly detailed to show the world that U.S.-South Korea relations are so strong, right? They use semiconductor like 50 times because this is really about tanking South Korea's semiconductor industry by attaching it to the United States at the expense of China. It's only backfiring, of course, because China is becoming more independent with its semiconductor industry, while South Korea is watching its trade deficit balloon and watching as the U.S. offers nothing in return for its vassalship. But nonetheless, you know, here are the devil in the details. Here's the devil in the details about what happened. And it's important to note because a lot of escalations militarily actually occurred. And here it is. So the Global Times is also just an entertaining read because they don't pull no punches when it comes to this kind of puppeteering. It seems that South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol views or identifies the Washington Declaration as the biggest achievement of his visit to the U.S. He described it with passionate language as an unprecedented commitment by the United States. So this is what was agreed to, this Washington Declaration at the meeting. The Washington Declaration, issued after Yoon's talk with President Joe Biden, has two main contents: the establishment of a new nuclear consultative group, the NCG, and the upcoming visit of a U.S. nuclear ballistic missile submarine to South Korea for the first time in more than 40 years. It is set to strengthen extended deterrence against North Korea. So there you go. Huge escalation, right? This is a huge escalation in the nuclear direction. In other words, Yoon wants to bring back a nuclear umbrella from the U.S. However, compared with various gifts he brought to the U.S. and the cost of South Korea's interest in this visit, this so-called nuclear umbrella appears to be unrealistic and only bring new risks. It is not only not an achievement report to the domestic public in South Korea, but is highly likely to ignite a new round of tension on the Korean Peninsula. Its hidden side targeting China is also a potential hazard for South Korea. In the face of Yoon's return from the U.S., clear-minded South Koreans will be concerned and cannot possibly be delighted. So, yeah, I mean, do you think China's happy that a nuclear submarine is now parked right on its shores? Because South Korea, of course, and China are very close geographically. Do you think China is happy, or the DPRK is happy that there is even more of a commitment now from the United States and South Korea to escalate with the DPRK? No. What will it do? Will it help matters? Will it help peace? Will it help stability? No. It's only going to escalate things. And guess what? None of this has anything to do with the needs of, well, the South Korean people. The people in South Korea, they have kind of needs right now. Things are not looking too good internally. I covered right back last year, I covered the protests that were happening there. There's union mass protest strikes happening there because of the economic situation is bad, and they connect it to this intensified militarization of South Korea. They do. So some U.S. media have described the declaration as a fig leaf used for concealing embarrassment for the you get that, used for concealing embarrassment in parentheses here, because that's what it was. It was an embarrassment for the U.S. to dissuade South Korea from going nuclear, but its negative impact on South Korea is obviously more than that. It is full of irony to call it a diplomatic achievement or a victory for Yoon's government. Rather than saying that it has received an unprecedented commitment to nuclear protection, it is clear it has lost autonomy unprecedentedly. The real winner is Washington. It has almost no cost, only the declaration that is of little practical use. It exchanged the substance of the U.S. with South Korea's face. The Yoon administration wanted nuclear sharing, but the U.S. did not loosen its stance, and South Korea had to say no to nuclear decision-making. To elevate the irregular nuclear dialogue mechanism to a regular one and to send Ohio-class nuclear submarines deployed to Guam to South Korea on a regular basis, it is more of a psychological comfort to South Korea, but for Northeast Asia, it is like inviting a wolf into the house. So, context here. South Korea still does not have full control over its military. So, not many people know this. So, while it has in armistice times, right, in times where, let's say, the DPRK, hold on one second, in times where the DPRK in South Korea aren't in open conflict, like right now, South Korea has control over its military. But should there be any declaration of rearming, right, this conflict, a direct confrontation militarily between these two countries, there will be the ability of Washington to seize control of South Korea's military. That is, that's only like 2.5 decades long, right? That's been the case. Before that, the U.S. just had full control over South Korea's military. It didn't matter. There was no like, ooh, well, in these cases or in that case. No, it was fully under U.S. control. Now it is just partially under control, but in really important ways. And that's what Global Times is talking about here. It's by getting close to the US in this way, you're actually only sacrificing more of South Korea's autonomy. So the root cause of the longstanding nuclear issue on the peninsula lies with the U.S. If South Korea really wants a sense of security, it needs to urge the U.S. to adopt a more responsible attitude toward formulating policy toward North Korea and to work with all parties to promote denuclearization on the peninsula. Bringing U.S. nuclear power into the peninsula would inevitably create strong stimuli for North Korea and to further exacerbate the security dilemma on the Korean peninsula. The security presence on the peninsula is indivisible, and joint security is the inevitable choice for achieving lasting peace. South Korea is really on the wrong path. In this regard, the lessons learned from the conflict between Russia and Ukraine are profound. So look at that. Global Times is saying, hey, South Korea, do you really want to be Ukraine? Do you really want war to be sparked? You're not going to do well in that situation. You're not, right? The DPRK is going to continue to militarize and to defend itself if it feels provoked from South Korea. And this move, right, getting nuclear submarines from the United States and giving the U.S. even more control over South Korea militarily is only going to exacerbate that problem for South Korea itself. But then you factor in the equation China. China is very unhappy by a military encirclement. I'm going to show you a graphic on exactly why that might be. And all of this is to say is that South Korea is not in a good position here. So China is saying, learn from Ukraine. Ukraine isn't doing too hot. You're not going to be doing too hot either very soon. Yoon's visit to the U.S. is already more than so this was a little old, a couple days old. So it's already happened. The visit has ended, but it's obvious that South Korea did not get the autonomy it expected. Instead, the U.S. has gained even deeper control over the country. It is more clearly reflecting the leaders' joint statement in the commemoration of the 70th anniversary of the alliance between the U.S. and the Republic of Korea, issued the same day as the Washington Declaration. The statement's position on regional and major international issues is completely in line with Washington's tone in terms of content and language. Although it is called a joint statement, South Korea is merely a signatory. The joint statement ambiguously talks of the so-called economic coercion and once again mentioned peace and stability in the Taiwan Straits. Being a signatory to such a statement is bound to harm mutual trust with China. So there you have it. South Korea again pulled the China card and decided it was going to go with the U.S. on this issue again, right? By not affirming the one China principle. China has raised eyebrows right now. China knows that South Korea has been playing a dangerous game for many years, especially since the encirclement of China began circa around the Obama era or really intensified. But now it has become even more problematic, and China is well aware of this. At the joint press conference after the meeting between Joe Biden and Yoon, the U.S. side talked almost exclusively about how these achievements would, quote unquote, achievements would promote U.S. interests, and journalists were more concerned about domestic U.S. affairs. Some netizens in China described the interests of South Korea as equivalent to air at this press conference. This undoubtedly made Yoon's mention of a truly global alliance at the press conference even more awkward, meaning President Yoon, it was like South Korean president wasn't even there. That's what this meeting was. It was just come over here, do what we say, get out. That's how the U.S. treats its so-called allies, and South Korea is no different. Sing us American Pie, good little puppet. Sing us American Pie, will you? Recently, there have been media reports in the White House that Washington requested Seoul to put pressure on South Korean chip manufacturers to not increase chip sales to China when China investigates the U.S. company Micron Technology to prevent Korean companies from taking advantage of the market gap left by U.S. companies. This is a true reflection of the U.S.-South Korean relationship. Previously, South Korea had been talking about diplomatic relations with four major powers, but now has become completely one-sided toward the U.S. It is inevitable for it to lose balance and even lose itself. The American Newsweek publication has an article that was published during Yoon's visit to the U.S. suggesting that it's time for an East Asian NATO, advocating for a so-called economic NATO based on democratic values with the U.S., Japan, South Korea, and China's Taiwan region, which is a malicious and sly proposal made by someone who sees that the U.S. controls South Korea. South Korea's strengthening dependence on the U.S. is the vulnerability that the U.S. has seized. Some have said that all the governments of South Korea's history, Yoon administration may be the least independent-minded toward the U.S., and this visit to the U.S. undoubtedly confirms this evaluation. So this was the prize for the United States, right? This is exactly what the United States wanted. And so the Global Times is always very, I would say, entertaining in this regard, because what it outlined there was in very, I would say, sharp terms, right? Very sharp terms, that the DP that South Korea is nothing but a pawn of the U.S. And this is what the Biden administration always wanted from the beginning of its first term, that's quickly coming to an end. The elections are happening very soon. There's already preparations for Biden's reelection effort. But his goal from the beginning, with China, with the DPRK, with so-called adversaries in the region, but China being the biggest prize, was to create so-called multilateral institutions, multilateral being really just a catchphrase here for making so-called quote-unquote alliances on its own terms that would follow its diktats. So essentially that was the goal, right? The Quad, AUKUS, all of these military alliances that the Biden administration has either spearheaded or strengthened have all been about isolating and containing China through multilateralism. But not multilateralism as Russia and China see it, as most countries in the world would like to see it through the UN Charter and how it's outlined there, mutual cooperation, etc. No, that's not mutual cooperation. This is U.S. domination. It is the United States telling weaker countries, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, etc., you need to follow us or else. You need to follow us or else. And we're going to call China the boogeyman. And you're going to have to decouple from China, get closer to us. And what will we offer you? We'll offer you more war. Here's a nuclear submarine, South Korea. Give us more control over your political situation, your military situation, so that we can provoke with the DPRK, we can provoke with China, and we can continue this encirclement campaign that has been the goal all along. And guess what? Follow us on Taiwan. That South Korea did this is the ultimate betrayal, right? To betray the entire region, all of the Asia Pacific, by going on with the US on the Taiwan question is inexcusable. And I don't believe this administration is going to make it very far. I just don't. I think this administration in South Korea is not going to make it very far, because it comes on the heels, right? It comes on the heels of a massive crisis of legitimacy. This president in South Korea had his government spied on by the US. Not only did he have his government spied on by the United States, but he has not been willing to commit to the people of South Korea any kind of legitimate compensation to the victims of Japanese aggression. Not only this, but he has been willing, before even getting anything in return from the United States, to suicidally tank his own economy, South Korea's own economy, by promising not to trade with China where any gaps may arise in China's investigation of Micron technology, of this chip industrial company of the United States. So South Korea has basically said to the United States, we will kiss your feet. This is what Yoon has done. He said, I will kiss your feet. I will sing you American pie, and I'll do whatever you want, even if it means increased escalation in the region, even if it means the threat of nuclear conflict, whether it's the DPRK or China, and even if it means that South Korea will be sacrificed. Its national interests will be sacrificed. It doesn't matter, because President Yoon is ready to play puppet. His visit with the United States was all about playing puppet. And now the consequences are going to start to bear fruit, and it will be very, very sour for South Korea. And you better believe that China and the DPRK are ready to respond. The DPRK, with this latest military escalation, will respond militarily. China, both with the military escalation and the economic front, it will continue to do what it has done from the beginning of this encirclement campaign, push forward with multipolarity, and increase its own self-reliance. It will increase its own self-reliance, and it will build strong relations where strong relations are wanted, and it will be okay. Not only will it be okay, but it will likely thrive. South Korea, on the other hand, can say no such thing. South Korea's destiny is in very perilous hands with the United States, and it is showing how the United States' continued war on Korea through the Korean War, which is still ongoing, armistice does not mean peace, still has a huge impact today. And now that South Korea's government is on this puppet trajectory, we can expect that there will be major unrest in South Korea, as well as major consequences for regional stability. And that's the reality. But it will not change. Just like Ukraine, the conflict will not change the trajectory for Russia overall or for the world. So too will this not change many things other than the status of that government, the situation internally in the country, and the level of danger that has now been brought forth to the region because of the US and South Korea's puppetry. But the overall multipolar world order and the development of it, that's not going to change. South Korea just won't be a party to it. But we have to watch closely because we might see a different tune start to be sung. It might be less American Pie and more Sun Tzu when the SHIT hits the fan for South Korea, because this is not something that's necessarily new. Over the last couple of years under Yoon, South Korea has talked a big anti-China game, but has ultimately decided to invest and work closer with China. Let's see if that has truly changed and Biden and the White House has truly been able to secure a total vassal in this way. I don't think so, but we'll see. We'll see.